Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining me today in the webinar, which we're doing specifically just for CRICOS providers. My name is Alex Schroder, and I see I've got a lot of regulars here today. For those that do not know me, I've been in the vet sector now for longer than I care to remember because it makes me feel old. I do a lot of things in the vet sector. I'm involved in a lot of things in the vet sector. I practice as a sanction management specialist. I also do a lot of tribunal work for RTOs that are about to be sanctioned or are facing an ASQA sanction. Guys, I sat on the ASQA stakeholder liaison group for, oh my gosh, should have been a year. It was more like 6 years. I've served on the ITECA Queensland board. I've written the Cert for an RTO compliance. I wrote the Diploma of RTO Compliance Management qualification. I've written a number of non-accredited courses for RTO practitioners. So look, I'm not going to go on about myself. If you want to know more about me, feel absolutely free to go and stalk me on LinkedIn, and I absolutely will not be offended. Okay, what are we looking at today? I've done this. Oh, sorry, before we go in there, a bit of housekeeping. If for any reason we do not have enough time for, what am I doing here? Hold on, give me 1 second. I'm just trying to play around with these. You know what? Easier. Let me do this. Okay. We are going to hopefully have a Q&A section at the end of this webinar. I'm going to try and keep the information that I'll be sharing with you as short as possible without obviously skipping out on sharing really information stuff with you guys. However, if there's any reason, or if for any reason there isn't time for a Q&A, or if I don't get around to answering your question during the Q&A session, or even if after the webinar, you know, if you're sitting there this afternoon or next week and you're going, you know what, I should have asked Alex's question during the webinar, feel free to email your questions to info@arcp.edu.au, and the ARCP guys will forward it on to me. One question or one request though, please, if you do send a question in, please make sure that you include your mobile number. Sometimes when questions come in, it's easy for me to just dash you off a quick response. But sometimes when I read questions, I think to myself, you know what, let me have a chat with the person, because there might be more to than just 2 or 3 words, or I might need to understand your situation better, etc. When it comes to situations like that, if you have included your mobile number for me, it means I can pick up the phone and I can give you a quick call and say, hey, let's have a very quick chat about your question. Future webinar topics, guys. I know we are currently running a series of webinars specific to audits, and up until now we've gone through how to get ready for an audit, what to do if your audit doesn't go well, etc., etc. The next webinar in 2 weeks' time will be the last one in the audit series, where we'll be looking at I think it's rectifying non-compliances or something like that. Have a look at the ARCP website under the webinars tab for the webinars that are coming up. You'll see at the moment, or the next webinar will be uploaded shortly. But yeah, like I said, just keep an eye on that. As per audits and current regulatory activities, the reason why I'm doing this CRICOS special webinar today, and guys, this is the first time ever that I have done a webinar specifically for CRICOS providers. I've done it because there is so much going on in your space, and ASQA is busy hitting CRICOS provider after CRICOS provider after CRICOS provider, and although they're obviously also looking at domestic providers, we are just getting so many emails and calls in from CRICOS providers that are saying to us, we've just been ASQA'd, please help us, we are in trouble. So that is the reason why I'm doing this CRICOS special, but also please remember that as CRICOS providers, at the moment, CRICOS providers are in the spotlight insofar as ASQA is concerned, and you do not want to get caught off guard with an ASQA audit. One of the ways, of course, to ensure that you are 100% compliant 100% of the time is to continuously do your internal audits. Now, guys, you're forever hearing me say this. When you do your internal audits, and best practice and especially in this current climate, is do your internal audits quarterly, and then once a year before you do your annual declaration on compliance, then you have a big annual audit done. And don't expect your compliance practitioners within your own RTO to do this, because if you are asking them to go and do the internal audits themselves, essentially what you're doing is you're asking them to audit their own work, which is not the best thing to do, because you're asking people to go and essentially double check what they've already done. The best way to ensure that your RTO is 100% compliant 100% of the time is when you do your quarterly internal audits, get your compliance practitioner in to come and do it. But also make very sure that your compliance practitioner actually know what they're doing and actually know exactly what ASQA is looking at the moment, because otherwise they may not be able to be as effective as you need them to be. Certificates of attendance for today's webinar will be issued within 3 business days. Guys, do me a favor, please don't send emails to ARCP to say, hey, will I receive a certificate of attendance? Because the time that they are taking to go and read those emails and then get back to you, that's the time that they should be spending actually creating your attendance certificate. So yes, you are getting a certificate of attendance, and there's no need to actually contact the ARCP team to ask them if they will. All right, enough housekeeping stuff. Today we are looking at where CRICOS providers are failing audit or running into difficulties at the time of audit. And obviously we can't spend an hour talking about everything. So I've basically just taken the main areas where we see providers falling down time and time again. Those main areas are PRISMS reporting. They are the way that your curriculum has been developed. They're your training and assessment strategies, attendances, your assessment methodologies, resources, governance, and that's going to be an interesting one, change in management, and agents. So let's jump in. Your PRISMS data entry, your PRISMS reporting is one of the easiest things to get wrong, and one of the best things for ASQA to knock you on. So we are constantly seeing during ASQA audit or in ASQA audit reports, we are constantly seeing PRISMS, when they did PRISMS on their side, they come up with hundreds of errors and squadrillions of errors. And from an RTO side, remember your PRISMS reporting is absolutely essential. It is a massive compliance area, and even if you only have a few PRISMS errors during an ASQA audit, they are still going to whack you. So, sorry, give me one sec. So be very, very, very careful of your PRISMS data entry and of your PRISMS reporting. And when you guys do your internal audits, you also should look at whether your PRISMS reporting is correct. The biggest areas that we're finding where RTOs are falling down on their PRISMS reporting is non-commencement. Remember, guys, you've got the time frame in which to report non-commencement. Termination of or cancellations of international students' studies. Also another thing that RTOs often fall down in, or they fall down on, and they fall down on both non-commencement as well as cancellation or terminations by either forgetting to enter the data in PRISMS, which means your reporting isn't being done, or doing it way out of time. COE, not CEO, COE extensions is also a massive thing. For some reason, RTOs or CRICOS providers are actually not reporting their COE extensions in time. And sometimes we find that they just forget to do their COE extensions. And I completely get that because, you know, from a CRICOS provider or running a CRICOS college is, I know it's not that easy. It isn't that simple. There are so many things that you guys need to do because not only do you have to make sure that you are obviously complying with the 25 RTO standards, the NVIR Act, you've got the ESOS Act, you've got so many legislative requirements, and then you've also got to deal with international students. You've got to deal with interventions, looking after them. As I said, being a CRICOS provider is not easy and it's not a walk in the park, and I get that. And I think all of us get that. However, unfortunately, during ASQA audits, the ASQA auditors have got zero sympathy when PRISM reporting isn't being done correctly. Another area that we find regularly comes up in ASQA audit reports for CRICOS providers is unsatisfactory course progression or attendance. And when we speak about that, remember when you've got unsatisfactory course progression or when you've got unsatisfactory attendance, you need to enter that into your PRISMs immediately, because if we think about it, when our students come out, part of their visa requirements is that they are here to study, and they are meant to be studying, 20 hours a week, and they are meant to be attending campus in person. I think it's 16 hours a week that they have to be there. Now, if you as a CRICOS provider, if you are not reporting their unsatisfactory course progress or their unsatisfactory attendance in good time, what that means is that you are not actually advising the immigration department and all of the other government agencies that are tied into this. You aren't advising them in good time that this individual student is actually at risk of breaching their visa conditions or is busy breaching their visa conditions. And the breach of visa conditions, we all know, is absolutely critical. Now, I know it's really, really hard because we've got these students and we're here to help them and we're here to teach them and we're here to see them have this optimal learning journey that we could possibly give them. And we're here to make sure that their learning experience or their student experience in Australia is such a beautiful, remarkable, and memorable experience that no, we don't feel like turning around and we don't really want to sit there and be the big bad wolf that sits there with a stick and tries to, be their parents and try and sort of go, you must do this or else this. I know we don't want to do that, but we have to do it, because if we don't do it, then we are actually, or if you don't do it, you are putting your provider registration at risk, and you are putting your entire business at risk. You are also, through that, you are also putting all of your other students at risk. So please remember, you've got to report your unsatisfactory attendance progress and or attendance where necessary and within the given time frames. But also remember that if we've got unsatisfactory progress or attendance, we also need to still go ahead and we also still need to put in place intervention strategies. Now, one of the things that CRICOS providers so often fall down on is either their intervention policy and procedure isn't clearly defined, or it isn't tight enough to be really effective, and or what the policies and procedures say and what happens in practice is two completely different things. So be very, very mindful of that. Interestingly, on unsatisfactory academic progress, I've been in a number of CRICOS audits with ASQA in a very, very recent period of time. And one of the things that ASQA auditors very often bring up, as CRICOS providers, usually what happens is assessments get marked at the end of a term during term break. One of the interesting things that, as I said, that ASQA auditors have been bringing up lately is if you're only marking assessments at the end of a term, how are you able to identify early enough that students are not progressing with their studies as they should? Now, from the conversations that ASQA auditors are busy having with CRICOS providers, it's where they seem to, and look, I get where they're coming from. What they're saying is, hey, you know what, your term is what, 6, 12 weeks long, however long it might be. And they're saying, well, if your students, and I know that during terms that they do multiple units of competency, but they're saying, hey, if your students are not progressing satisfactory and you aren't picking it up until end of term when you are actually marking assessments, you have lost a period of time where you could have and should have put in place intervention strategies to help the students that aren't progressing properly or that aren't progressing satisfactory, so that we don't try and do a big catch up at the end of the term or beginning of the next term only. Now, operationally, it can be problematic because, as I said, most CRICOS providers, or a large number of CRICOS providers, the practice is that at the end of term, the assessors sit down in term break and they mark. If that is your practice, have a think about it and have a think about your workaround around that, because that is a question that you may very well be asked during audit. And the answer that the auditors do not want to hear is because that's what works practically. What they really want to see, from what I've seen during audits, what they really want to see is that assessments are marked a lot quicker, not being kept until the end of term, so that if there are concerns about progress, that it can be nipped in the bud immediately. Ditto for attendance. Remember that if we've got students that are just not taking their attendance as seriously as they should, or that are not attending their 20 or 16 hours a week, you need to be able to nip that in the bud immediately. Do not wait until it's too late, or do not wait for too long. Refunds, where providers are issuing refunds, one of the things that providers are being smashed on is the amount of time that it is taking to actually provide the refunds to the students, and your agent agreements. Your agent agreements, people are being smacked on the whole time because the agents that they have listed in prisons do not actually, one of three things usually happens. The agents that they have listed on their prisons are not the same as the agents that they are using. So often what happens is an agent comes on and we sign the contract and we are so happy because, hey, you know what? We've now got an agent that can bring in more students for us, et cetera, et cetera. And we forget to actually, and there's so many different areas that we have to obviously notify the regulators and the agencies that we've got a new agent agreement. And so often we actually forget to enter that data onto prisms. And that's a big one. Or sometimes what happens is it might be agent agreements that have been cancelled or expired. And it's also a case of the agents that are listed on your website. Does that match the agents in your prisons 100%? So when it comes to agents, there's a few things that you want to check at. Do the agents listed on your website, do they match the agents that are in your prisons? And do they match, and it's not an and or it's and, do they match the agents that you have reported through to ASQA, and do they match the agent agreements that are currently current. I know currently current sounds a bit weird. However, I'm trying to differentiate between those that have expired and those that are actually current. So guys, be very, very careful of that. With curriculum and course structures, your choice of units on how you make up your courses is obviously really important, but you also have to be really mindful of when you put together your courses, and especially when you do your entry requirements, whether your entry requirements is actually going to be suitable for the type of student that will meet those entry requirements. And to give you an idea, I know that for a while, and I think still, the graduate diplomas, especially the graduate diplomas in learning and management, etc., are really popular with overseas students. Now, if you look at the grad diplomas, if memory serves, on training.gov, with the grad diplomas, although there is no specific age entry requirement, the grad diploma entry requirements on TGA is for people that have got substantial experience in working. So remember, we are not teaching people that have just left high school, or we're not teaching 20-year-olds, because the grad diploma simply isn't designed for them. Similarly, the grad diploma in learning, that is, the outcomes there are very specific for people that are going to end up working in an L&D role, or working in a education environment, or work in the vet sector, etc. Some of the criticism that we often see come up, or almost always come up, with RTOs that have the grad dips for their CRICOS students is in the entry requirements in the RTOs TASs, they will have there, they've got to be older than 18. Now, what I see time and time again is the ASQA auditor sits there with your grad dip TAS, and it says, hang on a second, you're saying that you will enroll anybody above the age of 18 in this course, but does an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 22-year-old, etc., do they have the work and life experience that a student in the grad dip actually needs, and that the grad dip requires them to have? And the answer is always no. I haven't come across one one CRICOS provider that has successfully been able to argue against that, because, guys, realistically, there is no argument. Also because, and I mentioned the grad dip in learning specifically earlier on, because the outcomes for the grad dip in learning is specific to a learning and development role, or is specific to a role within a education or a learning sector, it's not going to suit every single person that wants to apply for it. And in your TASs, and as you design your course, you've got to be very clear that the grad dip in learning is specifically for students that are interested in going in that stream. And then when you do your enrollment applications for the grad dip, you've then also got to be able to provide documentary evidence that before enrolling somebody in the grad dip learning, that you've actually sat down and discussed with them what they want to do moving forward, and why is it they want to do the grad dip. Because the grad dip learning, because here's the thing. If you don't do it, or if you've got people in the grad dip that looks like they shouldn't be in the grad dip, remember, during ASQA audits, they actually do contact your students. And they're going to be asking the students, hey, so what do you want to do when you finish, your studies, etc. And if it comes out that a person was enrolled in a grad dip learning, once again, just an example, but really when they finished their studies, they want to they want to go and work as a loss adjuster at an insurance company. ASQA is going to say, hang on a second, you have literally enrolled a student into a course that actually doesn't meet what they want to do at the end, once they've graduated. So what I'm trying to say is, ASQA is going to say to you, you've enrolled somebody in a course that where the outcomes doesn't meet what their own ambition looks like for their future, or what they are needing to achieve for their future career. Be very, very careful of that. Guys, just quickly before we go on, one thing that we all know, and just going back to prisms for a sec, remember that ASQA looks at your prisms before they even set foot before you even know your audit has started. That was a bit one sort of out of sync, but yeah, I just wanted to mention that. Your training and assessment strategies, where we find CRICOS providers so often come unstuck, is the timetabling. Remember, when you are doing your timetabling, remember you've got to put in there when your morning break is, when your afternoon lunch break is, when your afternoon break is, what time you start, what time you end, and your practices have to follow that. Also remembering that when you are actually working out your delivery hours, that your breaks don't count, and your holiday periods need to be very, very clearly defined and mustn't be included in your total delivery hours, because you're not delivering. The guys are on holidays. And yet we are still seeing that. We had a massive big ASQA audit report come into us, what's that, Friday? Probably around about last Friday or Monday, where this provider got smashed from a dizzy height, because of their hours and because of their holiday periods were actually included in the hours. If you are delivering any training product that requires special equipment, I'm thinking things like, I think it's your individual support qualifications, for argument's sake. Remember that although the guys go on work placement, when you are actually doing delivery, there are, and I mean campus delivery, there is equipment that you need. Like, for argument's sake, and guys, I'm not a specialist in individual support, but I believe that in individual support, it includes teaching your students how to help their clients, or the people that they're taking care of, with things like brushing their teeth and taking showers and washing hair, etc. Your campus, where you are delivering this, your teaching from, where you're delivering from before they go to work placement, you've actually got to have that equipment in the room that is dedicated for doing the practical delivery and doing the practical role plays, etc., in doing the learning of that in. But not only that, you've also got to make sure that you have got a sufficient number of pieces of equipment for the number of students. So let's say, for argument's sake, that you've got, most individual support places have in their dedicated delivery room, they've got a bed, they've got a person lying there, or a doll lying there, so the students can see and can be shown how to do things. If you've got 30 students and you've only got one mannequin there, does that suffice if they've got to go and practice themselves? That is always the question that you need to ask. With your work placements, make sure that all of your work placement sites, you've got the contracts for it. And before you actually start sending your students to the work placement sites, after the contracts have been signed, you've got to go in there and you've got to go and conduct an audit to make sure that the workplace, the work placement site actually does meet all of the requirements. Now, I know that we do these audits before we sign the contracts. However, you need to have documentary evidence that you did these audits, the site inspection, the workplace site inspection audit, after you signed the contract as well. And that is quintessential. You've also got to make sure that your trainers and assessors are actually doing their workplace visits often enough and per the tags as well. These are all things that ASQA are picking up on and that they are just hammering RTOs with. Give me a sec while I just quickly. Class attendance and online learning, that's an interesting one because especially class attendance lists, it looks so straightforward, but I cannot begin to tell you how many RTOs are coming undone. You know when ASK comes onto your campus and they're looking to see if you are a ghost college. And remember, if they're coming to your college and onto your campus and they're looking to see if you actually have students in there, it may not necessarily be because they believe that you specifically are running a ghost college. It could be because they've had an anonymous complaint in from one of your competitors or from somebody who's just pissed off with you. Or it could be because ghost colleges is such a focus point at the moment that they're just hitting CRICOS providers. One of the first things that they're going to do when they ask you they start audit and when they actually do a campus visit is your class attendance lists. Now I know that some CRICOS providers have now got automatic swap in, swap out for these students. Fantastic, as long as their students are obviously signing in and out as they should. However, what we find is that for providers that haven't gone to anything technologically based, how's that for a word, with their attendance, is we find one of a few things. A, class attendance lists just aren't being completed. Or B, the trainer and assessor goes and completes them, but not actually the students. Or C, the attendance hours aren't correct. And so here's a few things. You don't want your trainer and assessor completing that because your students need to be signing in. They need to be signing the attendance list as they actually come to class. And what's really important is a few things. A, let it be in their handwriting because that shows that one person didn't sit there a month later and quickly go and write down dates and times. B, if a student arrives, let's say your class starts at 9 o'clock. If the student arrives at 8:55, then they sign in at 8:55. And if your class ends at 3:30, don't have your class attendance list show that you were going until 4 o'clock. Your class attendance list, your sign in, your sign out must be on exactly the times that your students arrived and that they left. Now, another thing that we often find is that students go out for lunch and they either come back late after lunch. So you know how you always have these students that we say, hey, lunch is from 1 until 1:45, and 90% of your class is back at 1:45. 8% of your class comes back at 2, 2:10, 2:15, and they sort of draw back. And of course, you've always got the 2 or 3% that just don't bother coming back at all. Now, obviously, we don't want them signing in and out every single time that we have morning, afternoon, or lunch break. However, let's say that the trainer and assessor notices that, let's call her Nadine, that student Nadine came back from lunch at 2:08 instead of 1:45 as she was instructed to do. Your trainer and assessor needs to make a note next to her name on the class attendance list for that day that she came in late, back from lunch. Or even if she arrives late for the start of the day. Let's say that your class starts at 9 o'clock and she arrives at 9:12. Your trainer, she will sign in as arriving at 9:12, and your trainer and assessor must ensure that she has signed in at 9:12. Ditto for leaving early. Because guys, if we get this wrong, you are leaving yourself up for an endless amount of pain. Because remember that your attendance, your class attendance list, that is your documentary evidence that your class attendance hours for each student actually meets what is required of them. And remember that if your class attendance hours are wrong, and you do need to introduce an intervention strategy for any student because of unsatisfactory attendance. If your records show one thing and reality is a different thing, it's so hard to get out of that once ASQA has seen that. Once again, please make very, very sure that your trainer isn't completing that. And guys, you've got to do class attendance lists for every single day of face-to-face activities. Also make sure that the classroom delivery activities actually match your, what's what I'm looking for? Your lesson plan for the day. The last thing you want is for ASQA to walk into your campus and see that your trainer's lesson plan does actually not match what they're delivering. Or even going back and you know, they do, guys, they go back and they do analysis and they do checks. Make sure that your trainers and assessors are actually following their lesson plans as they need to on that day. And you know what? Let's say, for argument's sake, you get a trainer and assessor like me who just talks forever. I mean, it's now, what, 36 minutes after we started this webinar, and I'm sort of about halfway through, and I'm still talking. So if you do have TNAs that do talk and that do interact with the class a heck of a lot, more than what the time allowed in the lesson plan is, and let's say they get to the end of the day and they haven't completed everything on the lesson plan, let them go ahead and let them adjust the lesson plan for the next day. Remember, lesson plans do not have to be set in stone. They are like so many other operational documents. They need to be organic. They need to be, it's an evolving document. So once again, if your trainer and assessor finds that they weren't able to complete the entire lesson plan in that day, then they need to go and they just need to tweak the lesson plan for the next delivery of that unit of competency to that class. They just need to go and tweak that a bit so the documentation actually meets the actual practices. Your student trainer ratio is so important. I've said this so often in other webinars, and guys, it's massive. The days that you can go and have 30, 35, 40 students to one trainer, those days are gone. And no, there's no magic formula as to what the correct and the acceptable trainer-student ratio is. I can say to you very confidently, if it's 20 to 1, you sweet. If it's 25 to 1, you're still sweetish. However, I also appreciate that we can't always afford to have a trainer-student ratio of 20 to 1 or 25 to 1 for whatever reason. What I will stress to you is that if your trainer-student ratio gets to the high 20s, bordering onto 30, you are taking a massive risk. Please be aware of that. Online learning, and I know that we can, I know that our students can be on campus for 16 hours a week, and I know that the other 4 hours a week can be made up of online learning. And of course, as a provider, we love that. Our students love that, etc. However, it's a trap. It's an and oh my God, I sound dramatic. However, it is an absolute trap if you do not do it correctly, because where your students are doing their online learning from home, it's got to be very directed learning. So you need to say to them, hey, in your 4 hours of studying from home, this is what you need to be covering. And then your RTO also has to have a process in place where they can actually confirm that the students actually did the learning in those 4 hours and didn't go off and work or go partying or go to the beach, etc. But you have to be able to demonstrate how you have effectively monitored that during their 4 hours that they are actually learning. And guys, in some instances, ASQA have also said to providers that what they are really expecting to see is that your trainer does virtual delivery during that 4-hour block to their students. One of the things you must always, always, always keep in mind is that those 4 hours of online learning, they form part of the mandatory 20 hours learning per week. And as a CRICOS provider, you need to be able to demonstrate that your students are attending classes, campus or classes, be it in person or online, for those 20 hours a week. And where you've got students that are not doing those extra 4 hours online, or where they can't demonstrate and you don't have the evidence that they've been doing it, then those 4 hours can't count. And yes, remember I said in the very beginning that we don't want to sit here and we don't want to be slapping our students left, right, and center for doing the wrong thing. We don't want to feel like we are policing them the whole time. But remember that if you don't, you're putting your registration at risk. Oh my gosh, I've got 20 minutes, including Q&A, so I'm going to just quickly go through these. Assessment resources is still a massive thing. Remember, your off-the-shelf assessment tools, you must validate them before you use them. And yes, it's also now part of the 2025 RTO standards. But the thing is that and I know that all of these off-the-shelf assessment tools, the developer gives you this long, big song and dance, and it's in writing, etc., that the tools have been validated, that they are fit for purpose. And oh my God, they've gone through hundreds of audits with no complaints or no non-compliances whatsoever. Those of you that have been to my webinars on assessment resources in the past, you will know that I always say to you that is the biggest who shot John possible. And when I say who shot John, it's the biggest fallacy possible, because first of all, when your resource provider, when they give you this big statement that they've gone through hundreds of ASQA auditors with no non-compliances, don't believe it. Remember, guys, I can say to you, hey, living here in Melbourne, I have, that's actually, I can't think of a good example right now. Where I'm trying to come from is people and businesses can make claims that they want. The proof is always in the pudding. And for you, if you are using commercially developed assessment tools, your proof will be in your pudding when you are being audited by ASQA. We've recently looked, and there are providers whose tools are better than others. We recently helped with an initial RTO initial registration setup, and we went to a developer whose tools are really better than the rest. And they also said the usual, always passes ASQA audit. They've gone through bazillions of ASQA audits, no problem. And the documentation said, the tools are valid, etc. When we actually validated them as part of the initial registration audit preparation, they were non-compliant. And yes, the non-compliances that we found in the assessment tools were a lot less than some of their competitors are. But remember, non-compliant is non-compliant. And if you have a look at all of when you buy commercially developed assessment tools, if you have a look at in your actual licensing agreement, there's always one little line that says that it is up to the RTO to ensure that those tools are compliant. So be careful if you've got commercially developed assessment tools. Have those assessment tools validated by people that actually know how to validate assessment tools, and by people that actually know what a compliant and sufficient assessment tool actually looks like. Ditto, if you've had your your tools custom developed, it's one thing for even by an industry specialist. We were working with an RTO just recently, and I think they did healthcare, and they had an industry specialist go and write their assessment tools. And although the assessment tools were very well written from an industry specialist point of view, or from an industry specialist perspective, the tools and the way that this person wrote the tools did not actually meet all of the requirements of the relevant unit of competencies or units of competency. So therefore, the assessment tools were non-compliant. Very, very careful of that. Guys, also remember, you've always got to validate your assessment outcomes as well. We're still seeing, unfortunately, an alarming number of assessors, trainers and assessors that are ticking and flicking. Remember, if they're ticking and flicking, that's on you as the RTO. And at the end of the day, if your RTO gets sanctioned or if your RTO gets whacked, the TNAs go on to the next RTO. You sitting with a problem that they caused for you. So once again, no, we don't want to aggravate our TNAs. We don't want to alienate them. And we do, we're a team. Your RTO, you're a team. So we don't want to become a case of us and them being the TNAs, but also remember that if they muck up, like I said, they move on, you end up carrying the can. Governance, might just get to Q&A time. Guys, areas where CRICOS providers are failing, and all of these areas here, or the ones that I'm going to be discussing now, ASQA is categorizing that and throwing it into the governance category. So your policies and procedures, you always need to make sure that your policies and your processes actually match your practices. And if you find that there is a misalignment between your documented policies and procedures and your practices, the answer is very, very simple. Either amend your practices and your policies where you can to align with amend your processes and your policies where you can to align with your practices, or align your practices to meet with what you've got documented. So 9 times out of 10, it's very, very easy to actually go and align your policies and procedures with your practices. And guys, it happens the whole time. We've got so many RTOs that, or put it this way, when you sit down and when you go and write or update a policy and procedure, what the author of that policy and procedure is envisaging and how it actually works when it's in practice is so often completely different. And remember, one of the stages of policy development or policy update is after you have rolled out the policy, that you then, for the first few months, you do continuous monitoring to see if how the policy was written, if that was actually practical to be implemented within your RTO. So if you find it hasn't, make changes. Your systems and processes, they've got to be correct. They've got to be workable, they've got to be suitable, they've got to be fit for purpose. And it's the same thing. If you've got documented systems and processes that where the documentation does not actually meet the practice, go change them. Go make some tweaks so that they actually align. But the one thing you must have, and there are actually still providers out there that actually don't have clearly defined systems. Guys, remember, you need systems, especially under the 25 RTO standards. You need systems for so many things. And especially you need your compliance systems. You need your compliance / quality assurance system, etc. So at the end of this webinar, be it today or next week, go sit down in your RTO, have a chat with your compliance manager if you are not the compliance manager, or your training manager, or the relevant people, and find out what systems you have and have a look to see if those systems are sufficient for what you need to have. And that would be your first step before you then go and see if your systems are actually, or if your systems and processes meet your align with your practices. First sit down and see what systems and processes you have. ASQA are busy raining down on fit and proper person requirements, fit and proper person documentations submitted, as well as the accuracy of the information provided in the annual declaration on compliance. Guys, we are having RTOs come to us and say they are being threatened with sanction because of fit and proper person documentation that has been submitted that isn't 100% accurate. Remember this, within the vet sector, it's such a small sector, and I always say the sector is so incestuously intertwined that there's always somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody else within the sector without maybe even people realizing that they know each other. Also remember that with the updated FFP forms, ASQA put in there questions about whether you have been involved in other RTOs, previously being sanctioned, etc., etc. They put in there a few years ago, do you have any family members that own other RTOs, etc., etc. So with the updated FPP forms, what they really and how the extra questions have really been designed is so that when you complete your FPP, they're not only capturing intel on you, but they're also capturing intel on your network. And where this comes to play so often on something mine is that you may have, your brother might own, might own an RTO in Sydney. Your brother or your cousin might own an RTO in Canberra or in Melbourne, it's back to Melbourne. You may, in your FPP, you may have neglected to mention something, or maybe you've forgotten, whatever the reason might be. Your family member, your relative, they've completed an FPP as well. The first thing that happens is as we go, cool, these two people are connected. Let's now start comparing the intel that we are getting from them. And so it spreads. And before you know it, they have got intel on all of your connections within the vet sector, and they compare intel. Somebody said to me the other day, and I haven't actually tested this, so this is third-hand information, that ASQA is also now using AI to go and analyze responses on your annual declaration on compliance, as well as your FPP. So be very, very careful. 7 minutes, I'm almost finished. Change in management. Remember, you've got to advise ASQA in a very, very short period of time. Do not forget to do your material change notifications. Advising ASQA of agents that you've brought on board or agents that you have parted company with. Guys, it is essential that you do that, because the one thing that is so difficult to go and argue against is when ASQA come in and they attack the governance systems or the governance structure within your RTO, because there's so much, because governance and the concept of governance is such a broad concept. There's so much that they can put in there. And that's why I've got anything else that goes wrong within your RTO will also be thrown into the governance box. And once again, governance is so big, it's so broad, and it's so difficult to actually try and argue against until the time that you are actually in tribunal. But by that stage, your operations have been affected, you're losing money, in fact, you're bleeding money, and then you still have to go and spend money to get to the tribunal. So be very, very, very careful of your governance. And this is something that definitely needs close scrutiny of consistently and regularly. And don't do it yourself. Get your compliance consultant, providing that they know what they're talking about. Get your compliance consultant to go and do the scrutiny for you. Guys, quick one for you. The search for an RTO compliance sorry, let me do it properly. The certificate in RTO compliance and the diploma of RTO compliance management. I need to apply to have these courses re-registered in the very near future, or re-accredited. And I think my application needs to go in about 9 or 10 months' time. I'm starting to do industry consultation on those now. So if you would like to have an input on adjustments that could be made to both the Cert 4 and the Diploma in RTO compliance, let me know. Or even if you want to have some kind of, give me an idea of what you think, how you think I may be able to make these courses better, because although I'm not involved in developing them, sorry, not developing, in delivering them, ARCP obviously delivers them. From the ARCP perspective and from my perspective, we obviously want to make really sure that the courses continue, because remember, I wrote these 7-8 years ago already, and yes, they have obviously been massaged and been adapted when I had to do the reaccreditation a while ago. But from my side, I just really want to make sure that these two courses that I developed for you guys, that they are still hitting the right spot. Future webinar topics, guys. I'm not going to spend time on this. We don't have enough time. If you want to know more about anything on this slide, please contact info@arcp.edu.au. And without any further ado, I'm going to go on to the questions that I've got. Give me 1 second. Let me just go to the right screen. Okay. Oh gosh, I've just closed my screen. Hold on. Tommy, I've seen a question from you. Give me 1 second. So Tommy, you've asked, are there any requirements about breaks? Like every 2 hours, there must be a break. Also, our 8 hours delivery time includes 2 50-minute break. How does this impact the volume of learning? So first of all, there are no specific requirements around how long you can break for. But if your students are only getting 2 50-minute breaks in an 8-hour day, it means that you are expecting them to go on for 3 hours and 45 minutes, constantly focusing, constantly learning, frying their brains as they're learning before they have a quarter of an hour break. Then they go out, then they come back, and it's 3 hours 45 again. What I have seen auditors do, although there's no specificity around or no mandatory break periods, is if that is what your RTO is doing, be very, very, very prepared at your next audit for the auditor to say to you, how do you expect your students to actually be able to focus full-time or focus continually for 3 hours and 75 minutes without them, their brains frying, or without them losing interest or things like that. Because remember one thing, Tommy, it's not only a case of being able to put in as much learning hours as we possibly can. It's very much a case also of we are needing to make sure that our learners are actually getting an optimal learning journey. And mate, once again, I actually don't know, and I haven't seen any RTO be able to successfully defend if we are not giving people regular breaks. It's like yourself when you're working, mate. Imagine if you sat in front of your desk, in front of your computer for 3 hours 45 straight without getting a break. Does that make sense? So, Mark, you've asked, what about online student attendance? Can trainer fill out and state online class? Look, yes, they can, because remember, if you do online attendance, and if your trainer does fill that out, or with online attendance, remember that you want your online attendance to be recorded, the entire session. because that is also your RTO's proof that A, the online learning actually occurred, B, how long it lasted, and C, which students were there. So absolutely, the trainer and assessor can fill it out. But also, if you do your online learning, so many LMSs have got the ability for students to actually log in via their LMS to go and attend the online learning. So if your LMS does have the capacity to do online learning through the system, as your students log in and out, or as your students log in and out, that's also your attendance register. But absolutely, your trainers and assessors can complete that for online learning. Guys, I have got one more. Rosalina, you've asked what time frame will there be for reporting the unsatisfactory attendance and course progress? Term by term or any specific time frame? Rosalina, it depends on your RTO's policy around that. So if your RTO goes, hey, you know what, we are doing reporting or monitoring on these intervals, then that's what you need to do. But also remember that you have got specific parameters around when a student is going to be at risk, and your timeframes also need to be very, very mindful of that. Guys, I've got one very, very quick last one, and then we really need to go. I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to Sana, you have asked governance. Can we be sanctioned if governance isn't what it should be? Absolutely. And once again, remember, governance is now a massive big part of the 2025 RTO standards. Also remembering that in the 2015 standards, or never before, in any of our regulations, have we ever had have we ever had anything about what proper and suitable governance looks like apart from now. So governance is absolutely something that you can be smashed with. And remember what I said just now is that governance covers so many things, that ASQA throws so many things under governance, and it's really, really hard to try and argue that. I do need to, I'm so sorry, I do need to go, guys. I've got a meeting that starts in about 2 minutes ago. Visha, I see that you have come in with some 2 questions. Visha, nothing is a silly question. However, guys, please email your questions. I'm sorry, I don't have time for more. Please email your questions to info@arcp.edu.au, and remember to put your mobile number on there for me, so I can give you a quick call and we can have a quick chat. If I find it's going to be more beneficial to you, then just a reply email. Guys, thank you so much once again for joining me. It's been a full-on hour, and as we all know, maybe I need more than an hour for these webinars. But thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you guys have enjoyed today's webinar as much as I have enjoyed sitting here and chatting with you and sharing this information with you. Have an absolutely brilliant weekend, and I'll see you guys in the next webinar. Bye-bye.